absolutely thrilled to share my latest sewing project with you that I'm wearing today. This is the Nina Lee Piccadilly Pyjama set. If you're looking for a very sophisticated and glamorous pajama set with impeccable detailing, including exposed bias tape on all of the finishes, as well as this incredibly stylish mandarin collar, then your search is complete. I couldn't be happier with the results of this project, and I'm really looking forward to sharing some of my experience with you in this video. I hope you'll find this video if you're interested in making this particular project, but also if you're just in the mood for a very cozy, comforting sewing vlog. Thanks so much for spending some time with me. Let's start with a few comments on sizing. This pattern comes in sizes UK 6 to UK 20, which converts to US size 2 to a US size 16. Now, I have explained this in a few of my other videos, but I always sew a draft or a muslin of the pattern before I even cut into my final fabric. Oftentimes, this is because I have fairly expensive taste in fabric, which we'll get to in a few more moments. However, the experience of sewing the muslin was very helpful in this particular case because, of course, I am sewing separates, and that does provide the opportunity to sew different sizes of the top and the bottom, which is exactly what I did to fit my particular body type. In this case, I decided to sew the UK size 12 top. It was a bit generous, and I did sew a UK size 10, which fit me okay, but I just find that especially when I am sewing sleepwear, I'd rather be more comfortable, and that's why I decided to sew the UK size 12. Now, with respect to the bottoms, I was able to sew a UK size 8. So again, that's actually quite a significant difference. Sewing a UK size 8 bottom, which converts to a US size 4, and a UK size 12 top, which converts to a US size 8. So I did end up sewing quite dramatically different sizes for the top and bottom of the pajamas, but I'm very happy with the result, and the pajamas fit me perfectly. And I actually think that this is one of the incredible benefits of sewing your own clothing, because you really are able to fit clothes to your specific body type. So I just wanted to pass along that sizing information for your consideration. I also wanted to share a note regarding the pants of this particular pattern. Now, they are described as being cropped pants, and that made me a little wary because I'm quite tall. I'm 5'9" or 5'9.5", depending on the day. And I have very long legs. So when I read that these pants were cropped, I knew that I would likely have to make an adjustment, and I ended up needing to make a very significant adjustment. So you can see here, this is the traced pattern piece that I made for the pant trousers. And this entire section here is a 4-inch addition that I made to the pattern. So I did lengthen the pants by a full 4 inches, which again, I find to be very significant. And you'll see in the cutaway shots that these pants are still very much cropped on my body. So I just wanted to pass along that you may find a need to lengthen the pajama bottoms if, like me, you are taller or have longer legs. Of course, you also have the option to shorten the pants if you end up preferring either a more cropped look or have shorter legs. So I wanted to share that information, which may be relevant to you. I've also linked down below a great video explaining how to lengthen or shorten your pattern piece. Now let's take a few minutes to discuss the pattern itself. Generally, I found that the pattern was incredibly easy to follow. This is actually the second Nina Lee project that I have embarked upon. I will link my experience sewing the Nina Lee Bakerloo dress below in the description bar. And as I mentioned in that video, I really find that the instruction booklet is incredibly straightforward and very descriptive. I would say that this pattern is absolutely a beginner to intermediate friendly, and the result is just simply fabulous. Just before we start sewing together, I wanted to share some information about the wonderful fabric that I selected for this project. If you watched my other sewing projects on this channel, you will not be surprised to learn that this is a Liberty fabric. I absolutely love Liberty's designs. This particular fabric was part of the Artist Home collection and is called the Mary Kathryn print. And this is in color palette B, or colorway B. As you can see, it's an incredibly vibrant pattern with oranges and pinks, which, to be honest, is not usually the color palette that I gravitate towards. I tend to prefer wearing blues and greens, but nonetheless, I saw this fabric and immediately knew that I had to add it to my collection. And funnily enough, when I was sitting in my studio the other day, I realized that this fabric really matches this wonderful quilt that my grandparents made for me. This fabric is from Singapore, and I've had this quilt now for over a decade, I think closer to 15 years. And sure enough, these gorgeous orange and pink feathers are just so perfect and reminiscent of this fabric from Liberty. So I just thought that was incredibly special. Clearly, my subconscious was directing me to which pattern and fabric I needed for this particular sewing project, and I couldn't be happier with the results. As I mentioned in the introduction, the pockets and hemlines of this piece are finished with bias tape or bias binding. I've linked to a fantastic tutorial below regarding how to sew bias binding or tape for beginners. I would definitely recommend buying extra bias binding than you'll need for your project so you can test it out on some scrap fabric first. That's absolutely what I did as I prepared for this project, and I will say that sewing the bias binding on the pockets was particularly challenging just given the somewhat curved shape of the pocket. It did take a bit of practice, but again, I will link below to a really fantastic tutorial. One of the top tips that I took away from that video is that pins do not work well with bias tape. In this clip, you'll see that I'm using magic clips, which are, as the name would suggest, absolutely magic. They are so easy to use and a really affordable but significant improvement to my sewing kit. If you watched my latest video documenting my experience sewing the Liberty Bella tea dress, you know that I don't always succeed in flawlessly attaching the collar to the neckline. I'm happy to report that this latest attempt turned out quite a bit better. The first step is to sew the uninterfaced collar piece to the raw shirt neckline, which you see me doing here. Then, with right sides together, you stitch the interfaced collar piece to the now attached shirt collar. You see me showing you where I will be stitching that here. And finally, you secure the inside of the collar by hand slip stitching it all the way around. I've linked to a fantastic video tutorial below that explains how to do this invisible stitching step by step. I completed most of this project in October, and the weather in Toronto throughout most of the month was incredible. So I decided to do some more hand stitching outside. And this is potentially an unnecessary step if you have a sewing machine that can flawlessly create buttonholes. In my case, my 15 plus year old Kenmore sewing machine is a little shaky when it comes to buttonholes. So I decided to actually hand stitch every buttonhole on this project, including the 2 buttonholes that you'll see me making later on the waistband. As usual, I'll link a tutorial so that if you're actually interested in learning how to make the buttonholes, you'll be able to do so. And here you can see me showing you the final product. I was really happy with how they turned out. I actually used embroidery thread, which again is discussed in the video that I'll link below, just to ensure that the buttonholes were a bit more durable than they would have been otherwise. But as you can see, this is the final shirt, all complete, and I'm very happy with it. The pajama pants, or trousers if I want to channel my inner British Nina Lee, were exceptionally easy to sew. Again, really the key distinguishing feature of these pajama trousers is the biased binding, in my opinion. And the other piece that was a bit tricky to navigate, although the instructions make it fairly easy, was the construction of the waistband, which I'll discuss in just one moment. As you could see, it was a bit of a process for me to hand stitch these buttonholes, and they certainly have their own unique character, as you can see in these close-up clips, but of course they won't be very visible when I'm wearing the pajamas. You can see here that I'm being very careful to show you that you actually sew the ribbon to the side seam allowance, of course, so that you do not see the stitch on the outside of your finished pajamas. Now, what I didn't capture in these clips is that you actually fold over the waistband wrong sides together so it forms a casing around the exposed seam. And what you'll see me doing here is stitching in the ditch from the right side of the fabric to secure the waistband. You actually leave a gap of about 5 centimeters on either side of each side seam, which creates the opening for you to insert the elastic. Unfortunately, I did not capture footage of myself inserting the elastic. I think I was quite tired at this stage of the project, but you will see in these final clips that the back waistband certainly does have a very bouncy elastic. Thank you so much for spending time with me as we completed the Nina Lee Piccadilly Pyjamas. I hope that you found this video helpful if you're interested in potentially making these pajamas yourself. If this is the first time you're hearing of the pattern, then I would highly recommend that you consider adding it to your to-sew list because it is incredibly fun, very approachable, and the end result is just fabulous. Thanks again for joining me. I can't wait for our next sewing project.